You want me to?
Well, what are your thoughts on August 2nd, 2008, with regard to the restoration?
Well, I think it's a great event. It's something that many of us have been struggling for over a decade. I think at the same time we should remember that this was a movement which actually started in Italy. It was a group of 3 Italian intellectuals that started the movement by making their petition, and in no way is this an anti-Italian move. On the contrary, Italians participate in the struggle for its return, as well as Italo-Americans in the States. I think that the coming back of the obelisk is also an inspiration for the rest of Africa, Benin and many parts of Africa, where the European powers looted treasures, and now for the first time we see return of loot, the biggest item of loot known in history, which is now back. And it puts forward 2 questions. One is, we could ask, why is it that that obelisk is being re-erected? What about its poor sisters that lie on the ground? Shouldn't they also be erected? The other thing is that this great act of restitution has to be followed. The British looted very much from Magdala in 1867-8, and it's now the time for Britain to follow the example of Italy by returning these items. But Italy also has to return some things. The little aeroplane Sahai, called after Emperor Haile Selassie's daughter, is still there, and this has to be returned. At the same time, we have Ethiopian archives still in Rome, which again have to be returned. So I think that the return of the obelisk opens a new era when we have to think of the restitution of loot taken both by Italy and by Britain, and also the loot in general taken from Africa and the Third World by the European powers.
There's great symbolism in the return with regard to Ethiopian and Italian relations. Could you elaborate on that symbolism?
Well, I suppose the links between Ethiopia and Italy go back to the Middle Ages and has been important throughout history. And the return of the obelisk, voluntary return of the obelisk, is something which we hope will be a landmark in Italo-Ethiopian relations, a real landmark.
The obelisk itself was built, if you will, or created is a better word, long ago, and many people are not familiar with the actual creation of it by the Ethiopians. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
The obelisk, which is tall, the one coming from Rome, is something like 24 meters high. It symbolizes many things, but it's made in the form of a skyscraper, the old skyscrapers of Yemen, with doors and windows going high up. And in a way it's the first important artifact created by Ethiopian civilization. So it symbolizes ancient Ethiopia. It's cut out of the living rock, a single piece of stone, and it fell, we don't know when, and broke into 3 pieces, of which 3 were taken on Mussolini's personal orders to Italy and erected. Now, the erection of the obelisk was a fascist act. It was put up on the 15th anniversary of Mussolini's march on Rome, so that in a way, by getting the obelisk back, we're reversing what Mussolini did. Mussolini brought the obelisk, and now we on the Ethiopian side, have had it back, returned.
I found an archive photo on the internet of the celebration, if you will, as you said, the fascist act on the 50th anniversary, where there's a big crowd around the obelisk, and I wonder, it's always been my view, and I don't know if you share it, that he put it in that particular spot to generate some kind of public relations coup, if you will, or public relations achievement among the Italian people.
Yes, he wanted to have it there on the anniversary of his declaration of the fascist empire in 1936, but they couldn't get it there in time, so it was brought in to celebrate the March on Rome, and as such it's a fascist object, a fascist institution. the obelisk was put up in front of what was then the Ministry of Italian Africa, and was part of his attempt to popularize the so-called conquest.
Now, it seems that the effort has gone on since the obelisk was looted. From that moment, the effort has gone on to restore it in one form or another. What do you think accelerated or made the last 10 years or so more productive than the previous 50?
Well, I suppose that it had started, the demand for its return and the condemnation of the looting of the obelisk goes back almost to the day that it took place. We have the Emperor Haile Selassie condemning the looting of Axum as one of fascist Italy's crimes against Ethiopia. And then really very little happened until the early 1970s, when the Ethiopian Parliament passed a resolution demanding the return of the obelisk, saying that they should be breaking off of diplomatic relations with Italy if the Italian government failed to return it, also threatening that the emperor should not be allowed to go to Italy on a state visit. And it was at that time that I personally got to know about the movement, which was led by people in the Ethiopian Parliament, in the Senate in particular. Now, after the change of government in Ethiopia, you had these three Italian scholars who made a resolution, a petition for the return of the obelisk. When we got to know that on the Ethiopian side, on our side, we made a petition of 500 Ethiopians demanding the return. And then it goes on, and scholars from all over the world wrote letters in support. And then finally you had the famous occasion when the obelisk was hit by lightning. Many Ethiopians regard that almost as a divine act, because at that point you found that the idea of return was finally accepted by the Italian government.
It's quite an incredible set of events, in particular that lightning not only struck the obelisk, but apparently struck in the middle of the night, so that no one was injured. I mean, I guess the humor comes in the fact that you can't make this up, and it's hard to deny that it's anything but divine intervention.
And I think Rita can say something about that, about the piece.
About the piece that fell. Yes, it was. It crumbled at the top only, and that was not part of the original obelisk, because that part was in fact found much later by the British archaeologist thank you, David Phillipson, who saw it in the wall of the Mariam church in Axum. So the part that crumbled was not the original material, but some probably cement substitute.
Yeah.
And I think that's also very symbolic, that the obelisk itself was not touched. It was what was put there to mend it later
it's
that
quite incredible.
could take the strain.
It's quite incredible. I draw parallels in my mind to Abibi Bikila's strength in winning the marathon in Rome, barefoot.
Yes.
And it's almost just the strength of presence alone that pulled him through the marathon. And in many ways, the strength of the beauty, if you will, and the symbolism of not only the obelisk, but the Ethiopian people is what restored it in many ways. It's just hard to imagine a poorer nation having such success. And I don't, as a person with Italian parents, I consider myself very proud to be Italian, and I don't want to pat the Italian government on the back because they did it completely reluctantly. And if it weren't for the lightning bolt, they would have kept it.
On the other hand, we must recognize that were people like DeMarco, right, publicizing the demand for the return, and Francavilla, who started this petition of three people. We have this petition of three people done by Francavilla, and then our group doing 500. And so it snowballed from that.
Yes. Now, are these intellect? Del Boca is still living.
Yes.
Is Francavilla still
Yes.
living? And these were the intellectuals.
There were these three intellectuals
Oh, yeah.
that it really started, as far as I can see, on the centenary, the anniversary of the fall of the fascist empire. The fascist empire fell in 41, and then on the anniversary of that, we had an article in Luneta, and then you had these three scholars making the petition for the return.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a movement led by people in Italy as well as outside Italy.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But in no way was it an anti-Italian movement.
Oh no. The only anti-Italian in the picture is Mussolini himself, the most anti-Italian of all.
Yes.
When I first arrived in Ethiopia in '96 for a very short volunteer trip of 1 week, I was expecting a lot of animosity from people. I wasn't sure what was in store for me. Instead, there was a reception like a long-lost cousin.
Yeah.
People were very, very friendly. And of course, when the topic of the obelisk came up, someone quickly found you and got you on the phone and arranged for me to be shuttled over there to your home in near Old Airport.
Mm.
And of course, that was very exciting for me, being someone who read about this in a travel magazine, that there were a group of scholars pushing to have this returned. And I just asked one of the teachers, who are these people?
Yeah. And they've got no business to be lying on the ground. They should be up, whether the Axumites succeeded in getting them up or not. It's what they saw in their minds and what they tried to do. I think the least we can do today is to follow, is to do what they tried to do and have that city look how they wanted it to look.
Well, I definitely agree with you, and it just seems to be all a question of will. Certainly the resources are out there. Can the world community rally around this and have UNESCO, or whoever it may be, actually do the technical work? I think if the will is there, I think it's going to be done.
I mean, there's no question that obelisk that is still that never stood. It fell as it was raised. We think. No question that it can't be raised today. It's huge, it's very heavy and so on, but it's not beyond the capacities of people today to do that. So it is a matter of will.
Well, I think we shouldn't accept this idea of impossible. We were always told that the return of this obelisk is now back, it is now going to be erected. We were always told that it was impossible to bring it back.
Yeah.
It's always easy to loot something and much more difficult to return it. But now it's been returned and showed it was possible, even although people said it was not possible for all sorts of reasons. Now it's there, it's back.
And the Library of Emperor Tewodros that went to the British Museum Library as it was then, we're continually being told that it's impossible to give anything out of that library, but there have been examples where it's been done in the past already.
In 2005, there were several manuscripts that I saw photos of you holding. And did they come from Britain? What were those manuscripts that were restored to Ethiopia?
Yes, they were from Britain. Not from government institutions, but private individuals.
Oh, private individuals.
Yes.
And these were what? Were they old scriptures or
Religious manuscripts.
religious manuscripts written in Ge'ez?
Yes.
Do you read Ge'ez? Do you understand it?
Not really.
Okay, but you're fluent in Amharic.
Well, very bad.
So some Ethiopian friends of mine, when I've mentioned Richard Pankhurst, have said, "Oh, he speaks Amharic better than I do."
I think that's
talking about
our
our son.
son.
Oh, maybe a little.
Yes.
It could be.
In fact, some people tell me that he speaks Oxford Amharic.
Okay. Oh, that's very funny. There's a new dialect, the Oxford Amharic. Well, it's certainly one of the achievements that the world can reflect on as a symbol of not only African cultural independence and restoration. The word Renaissance is almost cliche at this point, but it's also a symbol that of what countries can do if they're willing to make up for past wrongs. It's impossible to bring people back to life. It's impossible to heal wounds that are so deep sometimes. But with these kinds of symbolic acts, you can take a step forward. And I think in many ways, as much as it was a gesture for the Ethiopians and that Ethiopians felt great about it, I think Italians should feel doubly better, should be feeling terrific, that they've started on a path of not only understanding Ethiopia, but of forgiveness and reconciliation, if you will. I don't know how you feel about this topic.
I think it's late, but the fact is that it is an example for other countries to follow. And I think we shouldn't be isolationistic. We want to be in a situation in which each people, each country, has the restoration of what was taken from it. And then afterwards it will have an exhibition, it will lend objects from Ethiopia to Britain or from one country to another country. What we don't want is the preservation of loot, that it should be stolen by force and kept, should be released, given back freely, and then it can be exhibited on the basis of bilateral friendship between Ethiopia and Italy, or Ethiopia and Britain, or Nigeria and whatever.
Sure. It definitely is a way forward, if you will. It certainly marks a different era in the history of these artifacts. The history, even whenever something is mentioned these days about restoration, the Axum Obelisk is brought in as an example of what can be done. There's some, I believe, the marbles that are here in Britain that belong to Greece,
Yes.
Elgin marbles,
Yes.
and things to that effect. So, in a practical matter, I just want, for the purposes of this documentary, for the two of you to kind of elaborate on your background and your connection to Ethiopia. I guess I would just start with the kind of layman's way of looking at it. How did you two end up in Ethiopia?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it really started with my mother, who was an art student in Venice. She had many Italian friends and was interested in Italy. Then she saw the fascists beating up their opponents some 3 or so years before Mussolini's actual seizure of power. And then she was involved in various societies for Italian freedom. In particular, she founded the Women's International Matteotti Committee to draw attention to the plight of Matteotti's 2 sons that were being persecuted, and his wife. And then she became involved in the agitation against the fascist invasion in 1935. And
Well, she's still in Italy?
she was in England.
In England.
And she ran a newspaper in support of Ethiopia, New Times and Ethiopia News. So that we got in contact with Ethiopians, got to know Ethiopians that were in exile during the Italian occupation, or who came to Britain to study, and so now from that I went to teach in Ethiopia for 3 years and stayed half a century in one way or another.
Wow. Yes, from 3 years to 50. How time flies when you're having a good time.
It's the same thing. 3 Italians signed the petition. It was 500 then sign our petition.
Yes, there's a parallel there. Huh? There's a parallel there. Yeah, it's a beautiful story. And Rita, you of course met Richard here in London.
Yes, I went here in London. I was interested in Japan at that time. And he says, my mother and I are going to Ethiopia, would you like to come? So, anyway, some total result of that is for the last 50 years I've also been in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And became sort of absorbed in this political family. I come from a totally unpolitical family. And so I had the good fortune and to live in the house with Sylvia as well as Richard for 4 years, and learned a tremendous amount from seeing how a woman in her mid-70s could just up sticks and go to a new continent and start again.
It's fascinating.
And devote her life to promoting the good cause of Ethiopia. And children sometimes would come to the door and say, no father, no mother, and she wouldn't just give them something and let them go. She'd get them into the school, and and it really changed my outlook about life. So I benefited from all this, and in my turn was able to do something in terms of my own speciality in libraries, and do something to improve the situation of students and readership in Ethiopia.
What kind of work have you done in that regard in Ethiopia?
Well, I became, I was the librarian at the National Library for 6 years, and then eventually became the university librarian at License University. And so we had some support, some Ford Foundation support, and a new building, and so we were able to produce a library that was really supportive of the study that was going on at the university at that time. But also there was much going on in conservation, in support of attempts to register and save manuscripts that were in trouble in churches, and to educate people about the Ethiopian situation. We were involved in the Society of Friends of the Institute of Ethiopian Studies, the mouthful, and organized lectures about cultural matters. So, got sucked into the desire to help in that process and be able to do that.
The work that you describe and the work that Richard describes, along with Sylvia's work, reminds me a lot of the work of Pearl S. Buck in China. And the parallels seem so stark to me that here you have a country that is just fascinating no matter how you look at it. Let alone if a person visits, they're just completely impressed for the rest of their lives. But so few people know about Ethiopia, and there's so many distortions about what the country is. One of the things that I like to do with the obelisk, as you described, is just ask people to take a look at it. Isn't it just gorgeous? It's not only symmetrical, but it's inspiring. For people in the, correct me if I'm wrong, 4th century, to think of something that is a model of what you see in modern Manhattan or London or any modern city in terms of human coexistence, human achievement, is a marvel. So what I'm getting at is, are we overdue for an Ethiopian kind of educational world educational renaissance of Ethiopia? There really has been no outburst of understanding of the country.
Of course, we talk about the obelisk, but now forevermore we have to talk about the 2 obelisks, because now the one that was always there standing, and beside it will be standing the one returned from Rome. So there will be at least 2 obelisks.
And these were funerary monuments.
I think so.
To some degree, similar to a tombstone, or not?
I don't think that they're very sure, but I think they are in connection with the death of the kings.
Because what we don't know is, clearly at the top of the obelisk there were some marks, holes. Something was up there. We don't know whether it was a metal plaque, and if so, what was it? Was it a plaque of the sun and moon which they worshipped before the coming of Christianity? Or was it of some ruler? We don't know.
Well, so there's a whole city lying there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a city from that time to today. So, so buried under the present city is so much that we don't know about the Aksumite civilization.
Yeah.
A huge trading nation, and of course produced its own coins and palaces, and I mean the obelisk sort of symbolizes the civilization, but
Yeah.
there's so much more to it that needs to be discovered, because young Ethiopians, they're proud of being Ethiopian,
Sure.
but they would be even prouder if they knew more about their country and these marvelous examples of.
Yeah.
It's not just Axum. There's so many other things that Ethiopians have done in the past, and surely will do in the future.
Yes, yes. I brought with me a DVD of a kind of shortened version of the film that I want to develop. I'm going to put it on, and I'm just going to ask for your reactions to it, feedback, if you will. But I think it's kind of also a good conversation maker, if you will. Of what I've done is I've put it on the World Wide Web, hoping to get some reactions. I got one comment that said, "Thank God someone finally said this," and
That's a nice one.
yeah, it was very nice. It made me feel that okay, I'm having some kind of impact, because in many ways, people have a hard time believing what I'm saying sometimes. If I tell them that Lalibela has churches that are 2 stories high and they're still functional, carved out of one stone, they look at me like I'm from Mars. It's my infinite wisdom. Where did I put these DVDs? I brought a copy for you to keep. Oh, here it is. Yeah, brought this copy for you to keep. I'm going to put it in the player so you can hear. And also this book here. I don't know if you've heard of this book.
No.
Okay. I got this off the internet recently. I'm not quite sure of the accuracy of all of it, but I think some of the images may be useful.
Richard Parker.
Yes, you must know about him.
Yes. Yes, he did a book on similar theme,
Mm-hmm.
on the liberation campaign.
Well, who is he?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I find fascinating about Menelik in particular is he was a person who didn't know what a photograph was per se, in the way we do,
Yeah,
but was so amazingly photogenic.
yeah.
Just captures the whole image. And Selassie, more as well. He had an amazing ability to stand
Yes,
out.
both photogenic.
Very, very photogenic. And this is one of the things that I'm hoping will develop someone's interest in the
sorry.
nation. Have you ever seen? No, it's okay. Oh, I used. Let me just put it on pause because I think it's at the end.
So this must be an early work that he produced, and then 10 years later he writes the one on the liberation.
Probably, yeah. I picked this up off the internet. One other thing I picked up, I don't know why this is not starting at the beginning. The other thing I picked up, this is going to go through all the images till it gets to the beginning.
We see the obelisk. We see the obelisk.
Yeah, it's just rewinding because with all my technological know-how, I can't.
Cassiani.
Yeah, I'm gonna play it forward, but I can't figure out why it won't just automatically go to the beginning. My goal in this short clip, after reviewing it with a few friends, was to give someone who's never heard of Ethiopia little background, and then go into the war and the crimes committed. Yeah, so what I used here, I just want to pause it for a second. What I used here was I used one of the songs that moves me emotionally, but I don't really understand what he's saying, which is Tizita.
Oh yes.
It's probably a love song.
Remembrance. I mean, it's
oh.
sort of. It's a sad. Yeah, a love song.
So it is actually more appropriate than I thought.
Uh-huh.
I put it on because whenever I hear it, even though I don't understand all that he's saying, I feel very moved by it. And I put it on as a background to this again.
It's very popular. It's very well known.
Very well known.
There is also a song now which includes the obelisk.
Today.
Yes, recently done. It deals with the eternity.
Is that right? That is very interesting. I had no idea.
We're trying to get a copy of it. We haven't up to now. But it's been on Ethiopia radio.
Oh really?
several times.
In Ethiopia.
Yes.
Well, see what you remember the film Gandhi
Yes.
with Ben Kingsley,
Yes.
and one of the driving forces in the film was Ravi Shankar's music.
Yes.
So it was, yes.
We all know.
Sorry, by the way, the interview on the BBC World Service last night, I think it was, or maybe the night before, was a British Indian filmmaker. I think the film is something to do with Beckham.
Oh, Bend It Like Beckham. Yeah.
It's about an Indian girl who was interested in football.
That was Bend It Like Beckham.
Who?
Bend It Like Beckham.
Yes, yes.
Meaning, hit the balls, hit the soccer ball so it bends, and the goalie doesn't know what is going on.
And she's made a lot of other films.
Oh, really?
The woman, yes. Also on not sort of bang race relations, but sort of rather about life, but how it sort of impinges.
Yeah.
And she found it very interesting. I never heard of this film.
Yeah, it came out 5 or 6 years ago. The only way I knew about Beckham was I had traveled